Get your last name. That's very cool. And you guys have a lot going on. What can you give me this week?
Well, we asked Mike to come this week and just talk about some stuff. Mike is the drug and alcohol counselor at Eight Oaks Recovery, and he actually has an extensive background in pastoring with all kinds of folks, and he has been leading the men out there at Eight Oaks, trying to help them find recovery. And he works with them on a day-to-day basis. He got certified as a drug and alcohol counselor over the last couple of years, and he works with the men out there. And why don't you tell us how things have been going out there?
Well, they've been going really good. We've had 3 graduate last week. We've got a couple more about ready to graduate now, and we've had some incredible testimonies of people. Some of the guys at work experiencing God in their lives right at work, not even at the sessions, not at church, but when you're at work and God starts speaking to you there, that's pretty incredible. So we've had lots of success stories here lately.
And just to give people, just make sure everybody knows a little bit about Eight Oaks. Eight Oaks is a men's drug and alcohol treatment center here in Lawrence County, and it's a Christian rehab. But what sets us apart from a lot of other Christian rehabs is we're actually a clinical program. We have licensed therapists, licensed drug and alcohol counselors, and which makes us able to take insurance. So a lot of folks that are looking for Christian rehab, if they, a lot of the other programs that are available, there's a lot of really good Christian programs out there, but they're like a year long, and obviously that's not in, everyone doesn't have a year to take off and to go to rehab. And so what we have is we have a rehab that focuses on more like the 30 to 90 day rehab, like traditional rehabs that, like I said, deal with insurance and stuff. And the majority of the insurance programs are not Christian based. So that's what we've put together that makes us unique. And we've been Eight Oaks has been around for about 8 years, and we were primarily doing outpatient and jail ministry prior to about the last 2 years. We've been having people live in our sober living house and doing our jail ministry treatment. So, Mike, do you have, without using any names, we have to be careful with HIPAA laws here, but, since you've been working at Eight Oaks and you've been the counselor there ever since we have started the live-in program, what kind of long-term success? Have you ever had any of the guys come back or contact you that have, came through the program early on, and how are they doing?
Yeah, happens quite often, actually, Jared. One gentleman is successful in his business now. His wife and him were about ready to separate, and restraining order on one of them. And but God has miraculously in 30 days put all that back together, and now they're serving the Lord. They're coming to church. Their family, their relationships coming back together. Incredible stories like that all the time. We have another gentleman back last May, about a year ago. Him and his wife and his family was all split up, and he was full of anger. And within 30 days. He's back at his house. He's running a business, and he's about ready to open up another business. So, and the last time I talked to him a few weeks ago, he was doing fantastic. Him and his wife are still together. His family's stronger than ever. So, those are the kind of success stories I like to hear about. Of course, not everyone, not all stories in that way, but we have a lot of success.
I have a question. Is there statistics that show a Christian-based rehab program is stronger results than a non-Christian based rehab center?
There is a lot of research that indicates that, because, I think we referenced this last week, if you watch the movie Jesus Revolution, people are looking for something, and they look to drugs and alcohol. Because they're missing something, and that drugs and alcohol isn't going to fill that hole, what they're looking for. Where, if you get them, in a Christian program, and get them in that direction, it is more successful. Christian drug rehab is more successful. And just for anybody out there, if you have any questions about drug and alcohol or 8 Oaks or anything, I am going to give you the number real quick, and we are more than happy to take calls. We're more than happy to take Facebook questions, and Charlotte would read them to us. And the number is 766-9393. Again, 766-9393. So if anybody does want to call in, you can.
I made it really easy
Oh, there
for
you go.
you.
It's up on the wall.
I made it easy for you this week.
There you go. That's much easier. But anyway, so if anybody would like to call in or send us questions via any of the social media, I know we're on several. Charlotte would read the questions to us, so we would love to take some callers. But in the meantime, let me. Back to what she was talking about. Have you had many of the clients that's went through the program that have went through secular programs in the past and then found success with
that's an exciting question there, Jared. I've had several of them that have been to 6, 7, 8 different rehabs. And when they come out to 8 Oaks, they said there's just something different about where we're at. We kind of have a soft approach where we just love on the guys for 30 days. And they just seem to assimilate into that atmosphere and that environment very, very well. And their experience with God, it's so cool when you see somebody come in and for the first 3, 4, 5 days, they're just very quiet. Some of them are very emotional and they start crying. And they have to leave the sessions because they're just overwrought. And by the end of their stay there, they're talking, they're expressive, they're talking about God. Some of them have never even opened a Bible before, and they start reading the Bible on their own. They come in and they start talking about spiritual things. And one of the challenges that I always have is when somebody comes in that doesn't have a religious background is to see if we can get them to pray in front of the group. And most of the time we're able to succeed in that, and by the end of their stay there, they're engaging, they're praying, and they've got hope, they've got peace. And that's the one thing that I've noticed is that everybody in this world, Jared, there's one commodity that everybody wants. It doesn't matter what race you are, it doesn't matter what part of the world you're living in, it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, everybody wants peace. And that's the one thing that I think that 8 Oaks is able to bring to these guys is to bring them the tools to help them to find the peace in their life.
Well, and the other thing I think it's also helpful, I mean, obviously the approach of the spiritual, the Jesus-centered approach with the clinical, like I said, that makes us unique. I think the other thing I really like about our program, I've been around drug rehabs most of my adult life, not in them, thank God, but I've worked at quite a few drug rehabs. I think the setting that we have also, everybody obviously that's listening to this radio probably loves Lawrence County and Middle Tennessee and knows how beautiful it is. And our outpatient office is in West Point, Tennessee, and our housing is actually in Wayne County, right across the border there outside of West Point, Tennessee. It's West Point address still, but it's on like 50 acres, and it's just beautiful and serene. And I think that also helps, you know what I mean? Because I've seen a lot of folks, I've run and I've worked at big rehabs. You got 100 people, you got a bunch of people coming and going, there's a bunch of commotion, and when you get out into a calm area where you can like let things go. I like to say it's very disarming to be out there. I personally, the reason I live in Lawrence County and I actually have a farm in West Point is I love to be outside. I love to be with nature, and I think it disarms folks to get out there and. It just slows stuff down and lets you decompress and kind of have time to reflect on everything. And I think a lot of people that get involved in substance abuse, that's what they need. They need to decompress. I mean, there's a lot more they need, but that's a good that's a good first step. You know what I mean? Like you just kind of breathe out, and then you're ready to take some new information in.
That's right. Yeah, out there, that deck out there is just the guys just kind of hang out there on that back deck, and there's picnic tables there. And I've been out there and had some sessions out there right at the farm a couple times, and it's just a relaxing atmosphere. And I encourage the guys. Some of the guys that come in there, they're just so used to just doing something all the time, and to try to get them just to relax and just reflect. At first, it's kind of difficult, but then after they kind of settle in, they actually really enjoy that, and they look out at night, and they've taken pictures of the sun, the sunset going down, and just the refreshing and the stories that they hear about the breezes and the animals, and it's just a really good environment for them to be in. I should say something about the clinical side too, real quick.
What is the most common form of addiction you see at the recovery center?
I've seen probably 3 different. It's between alcohol, fentanyl, and meth. Probably, it's probably a toss up between those 3 that we see come out there most often.
We see the fentanyl is definitely on the rise. I mean, and it is becoming more and more predominant. I mean, and like I said, I've been working in the substance abuse field for 30 years, and it used to, 30 years ago, it was like you saw a bunch of cocaine, and then cocaine was replaced by meth, and alcohol's always kind of run like a steady pace underneath, and opiates would come and go. And it seems like since the whole, the Oxycontin thing, over the last 15, 20 years that kind of turned into the fentanyl thing, it's kind of seemed like, it used to be one would come and one would go. Like, you'd see a bunch of cocaine, and then cocaine would kind of subside, and you'd see a bunch of heroin, and it's kind of like when the pills came on the scene, the meth never went away. And, if you talk to the sheriff's department, and you read national statistics, not only even locally, if you look at the price, one of the best indications of what's going on is you look at the price. You know what I mean? And fentanyl is way cheaper than heroin used to be. Methamphetamines, I mean, the reason you don't hear about houses burning down anymore because of meth labs is because all the methamphetamines is coming in from Mexico, and it's so cheap that I know they've restricted buying the ingredients to make methamphetamines. But even if you could just go to Walmart and buy everything without showing your driver's license, it just wouldn't make economic sense. Like, an individual cannot make methamphetamines for what it comes in. So when you look at the pricing of these drugs today, they've got so much cheaper. And so that's one of the reasons the proliferation is so bad, is because they're more accessible. And I know last week we hit on some of this too. You got, the Delta 8, the Delta 10. I can't even keep up with all this stuff, and I've been working around this my whole life, and I'll go to speeches and I'll be like, I never even heard of that. And it's like, well, it's been out there for a while. But I think that, and to some degree, it is a spiritual crisis. Society has changed. People's family structures have changed, their community structures have changed. Like I said, they're looking for something, and they're missing out. They don't know what they're looking for, and the drugs might not fix the problem, but they don't fill anything, and so it just keeps coming, and you see a lot of polysubstance abuse today too, where people, they're drinking and they're using methamphetamines, or they're drinking and they're using the fentanyl, or they're young folks might be going to a party and they're drinking, but somebody brought some pills, and unfortunately a lot of times people don't know what's in those pills, and could be fentanyl, and that's where we get a lot of the fatal overdoses from people not even knowing what they're getting.
What's the average age of person that you see in recovery?
Well, that's a good question. When I first started, I thought it was going to be mostly younger people, but I've been very surprised to see a lot of people in their 40s and 50s coming. So I'd say it's probably about half and half between those in their 20s and those in their 40s and 50s. Those in the 40s and 50s have probably been at it 20, 30. I've had one guy who was at it for 40 years, and finally just, if what I hear a lot from those guys is, I've got one last chance. If I don't make it this time, I'm dead. And that's a surreal to hear something like that. And that's where we can give the hope to them. And thank God that we have been able to do that.
And a lot of times, I mean, like I said, I've worked at facilities that's had as many 1,300 beds, so I've looked over a lot of data, and I've also read a lot of government research, and it's kind of universally, over my entire time reading, the age of first use is regularly 12, 13, 14 years old, and what that kind of tells you is, if you can delay that first use until college, and they don't have that early experimentation because your brain isn't developed, it affects the brain differently. There is a big difference. Not that I mean, I've had folks that led productive their whole life, and they fall off a roof or get an injury, and they get addicted to opiates. And, you see that. I'm not going to say you don't see that, but just universally, addicts, the age of first use is regularly adolescence, and that I've seen that for a long time. That if you have that early first use, that you're much more likely to develop an addiction problem. So keep those kids at the baseball fields and keep your eye on them. And the other thing is, and I hate to say this, but I've probably answered, I don't know, maybe 100,000 phone calls, if not 100,000, tens of thousands, nearly 100,000 phone calls of family members looking for drug rehab, in my life. And, you hear people and you talk to them and they go, well, I thought my son was just smoking pot, but I'm starting to find burnt aluminum foil in his room. What does that mean? Well, it's like, kid's probably using opiates. I was almost said heroin, but I don't even know if people use heroin that much anymore. I think it's all fentanyl because the fentanyl's so much cheaper. And the thing is, people dismiss the alcohol, dismiss the marijuana, and you also hear people say, well, if I let my kids drink at home, not only is that highly illegal, and in this world you actually probably get in trouble for it. When we were younger, a long time ago, huh, Charlotte?
I don't know what you're talking about.
But people say that. People go, well, if they're drinking, and I know they're home, but the thing is, it creates those brain paths. And hey, I'm talking from somebody that's had 30 years clean. I actually got clean when I was 21, so I got an early start myself. Yeah, 51 this year. So, but anyway, so it's just that those delaying. Here's the reality: in the world we live in, and I'm not someone that says nobody should ever drink. And being like, I can't drink. You know what I mean? But there's a lot of people that socially drink, and I'm not opposed to that. I see a lot of problems stem from people drinking, but the thing is, there is actually science behind, 21. There's science actually behind, I guess if you want to really go with science, 25 is when your brain's fully developed, and when you start introducing substance abuse at earlier ages, the risk of addiction is so much greater than, and that's the thing, so like that whole thing where, well, my kid's 19, and if I let his friends have a party at my house, at least I know where they're at. No, you're actually creating those pathways, and the other thing is, if you're okay in that, kids want to push the line. So they're going to say, well, my mom's okay with me drinking, so when I push the line, I'm going to go smoke some pot. You know what I mean? So the tighter that line is, that every kid's, not every kid. I mean, I hate to say that. I know there's some folks that don't do that, but Probably not in my family, but none that are related to me. But anyway, so saying that, but like I said, I have been on the phone with countless parents, and you're sitting there talking to them, and they're like, "Well, yeah, I just think my kid smokes pot up in his room." And I'll tell you, one of the really sad things I'll tell you from working in the call center is you'll be sitting there talking to someone, and they'll say, and they're talking about someone, and you think they're talking about someone that's like I've mostly worked at adult treatment centers. You're sitting there talking to someone, and they go, "Well, little Johnny, blah blah blah. He's doing this, and he smokes pot in his room. He kind of isolates a little bit." And I'm sitting there thinking, like, "Was this kid 18? Like, do I need to find an adolescent program for him?" And you start talking to him, and you find out that you're talking to like a 74-year-old woman, and she's talking about a 40-year-old son, and it's like. And I'm not, I mean, we laugh about it, but it's like, and there's actually been books written about adolescents. And it's talking about those 22-year-olds, those 35-year-olds. And I have seen it. I have talked to people that are 40 years old. And the way they talk about their kid, like I said, you're questioning yourself at the beginning of the conversation. Are they talking about a 16-year-old? And then you dig down the conversation and like, no, he's 42 years old. I'm 70 years old.
I know one. I know one.
I would be surprised if you didn't. I would be absolutely surprised because it's getting more and more common that people, and the thing is, it's a two-way street. Like someone isn't living at your house at 30 years old, and you're supporting them without you not having your partner. And I'm not blaming the family for the person's bad behavior, but there is something called enabling. And if you got a 35-year-old living at your house, you need to change what you're doing. And you can't force them to do anything, but you can 100% change what you're doing and how you're interacting with them. And they end up with an entitlement like, "Hey, well, you're my parents, you're supposed to take care of me." It's like, no, you're 35 years old. Like,
well, they even have a name for that. It's extended adolescence.
Yeah.
And they are so used to just staying in front of a video game, going out and getting a job and coming back and doing the video game, going out and have a job, going out and video game. Then all of a sudden there's no more job. Then they get bored. So then somehow the alcohol, the drugs get involved into it. And it just extends their adolescence. And then they wake up at 35 years old and they don't know how to hold a job down. Now they're an alcoholic. They're like a 35-year-old body, but they're like the mind of a 15-year-old.
Yeah, adolescents. I mean, they're an adult in every way except for the. And the other thing is that they also say about addiction is that you stop developing socially when you enter your addiction.
Right.
And like I said, if the average first use is 12, 13, 14 years old,
that's where they're at emotionally.
That's where they're at emotionally. So the thing is, we get them into treatment and they're 27 or they're 45. Well, here's the thing. Think about when you were 12 and someone told you couldn't do this or you had to do this and how you reacted. Mm-hmm. Well, you've developed past that point because you were sober, you had thoughtful thoughts, hopefully over the last 10, 20, 30, it was, well, let's see, it was 38 years ago that I was 12 years old. Hopefully I've developed some since then, right? I did take a little break, like I said. I mean, I'm in recovery, so I took a little break, but hopefully I've caught up, to some degree. You can ask my wife; she may disagree she may tell you I act like a 12-year-old. But but the thing is, they don't have the coping skills that a regular 30-year-old. They have the coping skills of a 12-year-old that's been under mind-altering substances for 18 years. So it's like, what do you do with them? Well, here's the thing. It's hard for the family because the family says, hey, you got to get your stuff together. And, they're going to go to that 12-year-old response system. And, even in treatment when we're dealing with them, sometimes they act like children because they just they've been numbing themselves to get out of the real world.
Well, mentally they didn't have to.
Exactly.
Where your 12-year-old self were not on substance, you didn't have to.
Exactly.
But when you're sober, you know how to.
Yeah. And
Because you
and you
had
do,
to. You had to
and
get over it.
you're interacting with people. So yeah, so there's a lot of things that go along with substance abuse. And that's the complex part about treating it is you have to understand that these folks where they're coming at you from, and they're not gonna like if someone's 40 years old and they're still living with their mom and they've been smoking pot in their room since they were 12, they are not going to even have the cognitive to a way, but it's more the emotional development. Cognitive, they might have went online school and have a PhD, and so cognitive they may be really, but it's the emotional interaction that they lack. You know what I mean? So, which is actually kind of more dangerous because they're way smarter than a 12-year-old, but they still are working off that, that core brain kind of stuff and not really thinking stuff through.
But everybody's got a reason, and they got an excuse.
That's true.
If y'all know that better than anybody. Because I've got 4 kids, and everybody's got an excuse.
Exactly.
They've had a hard time, or they've had somebody else's fault, or,
Well, that's it. At 8 Oaks, that's what we deal with so much with these guys is to teach them that they're responsible for who they are. They're responsible for their behavior. It's their duty to, we try to introduce that idea of duty, where duty nowadays is something that you ought to do. It used to mean something, that it's an obligation, it's a commitment. And once these guys get that in their mind that I have a duty to my family, I have a duty to the community, we try to get them to understand, to give them purpose. And so much of the extended adolescence is they don't have purpose in their life. They don't have a vision for their life. And so what we try to do is introduce that to them, that there is purpose, that there's something higher than themselves, and that they have a duty to fulfill something besides just their selfish instinct to look beyond themselves to other people. And once that starts clicking, it's really cool to start seeing them begin to think that way, and they start treating other people different. They start calling their wives, their families, and their wives will go, you're talking different. There's something different about you. You're actually nice. So that's pretty cool to see that happen.
Mike, take us through a process here, because a lot of times we want to help other people. And, I know I'm a fixer.
Mm-hmm.
And
we call that codependency, but go ahead.
Yeah. I know. I'm a joker because I'm codependent on being codependent. I really am. But for all these people out here who want to fix their person, we can't fix them. How can you give us some insight on helping our person help themselves?
Go to Al-Anon.
I know you're laughing at me. That's okay, I can handle it. But advice for those people who want to encourage their person to go to 8 Oaks. Now, not nagging them, because that ain't going to work. If you tell me to do something, I'm going to do the opposite because you're telling me to do it. How can you encourage that person to do it for themselves without pushing them?
Well, that's a very good question. Of course,
that's the
of
way
course,
I
where
look.
we're at, time that we get them, they've already went through that process.
Okay, right.
So,
but the advice to the people out there who know that their person they gotta go, but
right.
That person that you want to encourage their person.
I've worked on the front end a lot more. Like Mike said, he gets them once we've got them through that process. There's a great book by Vernon Johnson called "I'll Quit Tomorrow," and it's probably dating myself. It's probably 50 years old. It was already an established thing when I came along, and it's kind of the blueprint for intervention. Like I'm sure a lot of folks have seen that show, Intervention. Well, Vernon Johnson wrote a book called "I'll Quit Tomorrow," and it's kind of the blueprint that all interventionists have worked from there. And one of the things to do is, if you are that codependent, if you got the 35-year-old that's living at home, or they're living on their own, but you're paying their apartment, you're paying their car payment and all that stuff. the blueprint for that is that what you do is you simply go to them and say, I have someplace safe for you to go, and it's not here. So I'm not kicking you out, but you're not staying in this situation anymore. Where I've arranged for you to go safely is to rehab. And if it's Eight Oaks, if it's any other center, that's fine. But the message that you send to them is, I'm not cutting you off. I'm not kicking you out. I am cutting off your addiction. And I'm not going to fund the addiction. I'm not going to help you with the addiction any longer. I got a safe place for you to go. But it just ain't here.
What you just said is actually a biblical principle. And this is what
That's why we have Mike.
This is what I've taught my kids growing up, and I learned this many years ago. It comes from Ephesians chapter 6. It says, "Raise up your children in the love and admonition of the Lord." Okay, so what's that have to do with anything? Well, what that is, it's love and rules, love and discipline. If all you give is a child love, he usually grows up to be a spoiled brat. If all you give is discipline, he becomes angry and bitter. But if you can balance the two right there, you got a golden child right there. Because what you're doing in that statement right there, he's giving both love and discipline. He's saying, I love you, but this is what's best for you. And when the child understands and sees that you build a relationship with them, and that child knows that you love them, then when you have to give them the discipline, they understand. And they might fight it at first, but I'm a firm believer that in the end, they'll come around. And what you just did there, Jared, was to give that principle of love and discipline. And that's all biblical.
Of course, the prodigal son, he gave him a bunch of money and sent him away. Let him go away. Let him choose his own way.
And what happened?
He came back.
Yeah, because the love of the Father. What did the Father do?
He took him back.
He embraced him, ran to him.
Because I thought about doing that with my kid.
Mm-hmm.
She's 25 and 24, and I'm like, I'm fixing to give you a bunch of money. I want you to go away and see if you can make it. But I'm scared, so she's not an addict, but I don't want her to be that extended person that lives in my house for a long time. But, she's addicted to video games at 24.
Well, that's a process addiction.
But
So
it is an addiction, and so, we are seeing now that it's a real addiction coming into this generation.
I have been around that, and I've had some training on that, and the video game addiction is it's shocking to me, working with the chemical, but it has a lot of the same. Like if you take the video games off, they actually go through like a psychological detox, and they'll fight you, and it is. Like I said, I've never run a video game. I've been around it though, and I've been to a lot of conferences, and I've been interested in it. So I've listened to stuff about it, and it's actually shocking to me because process addictions, so all eating disorders, anorexia and overeating disorders, and gambling, pornography, video games, those are all process addictions. And they're very different. They're very, very different. And one of the things I've learned from running substance abuse treatment, because there's the physical dependency, there's similarities. I'm not saying that but I've done enough research to know you can't do both. Like I've seen treatment centers try to do that where they're like, oh yeah, addictions. No, it's not. They're very different, but the similarities of like an actual detox from the process addiction, the bargaining, just like an addict, like, you know what I mean? Like, oh, just let me have one last hit. It's very, very similar. And like, I've actually seen I've heard of people, and like I said, I know but I've actually heard of people like, somebody takes the video games off and they can't sleep for 3 days. And it's like a physical withdrawal from a process addiction that isn't it isn't a physical, like if you stop taking heroin or fentanyl, you're gonna be sicker than you've ever been in your life. It's fortunately I've never went down that road myself. I have detoxed hundreds of people. I've been in detox centers, and I've been in detox centers, prior to the current generation of meds that we use today, and it was uncomfortable seeing people go through it. But you understand that. You go, okay, well, you stop taking an opiate. There's a physical withdrawal. Alcohol's the same way. But there is actually a physical withdrawal from video games. From like I said, I haven't worked with it firsthand, but from research I've read and conferences I've been to, 3 nights can't sleep from a withdrawal from video games.
Well, I've never seen it be her choice to cut her off, but I wouldn't. I mean, seriously, I wouldn't want to see it.
Let's do it. Let's
I mean,
go do
like,
an intervention tonight.
70 or 80 hours a week she plays video games.
Wow.
And I wouldn't want to.
Think about those hours if she would put that into something productive. And
I know.
what she could change the world.
Oh, and she's extremely talented.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. But yeah.
Yeah, we see that a lot with addicts, and that's the thing that I just sit back and I just shake my head so many times. I see some of these guys coming in, and they've got so much talent. They're quoting philosophy, they're quoting scriptures, they've got a deep understanding of mechanics and carpentry, and I'm thinking, my gosh, what they could do with all of that talent.
So what is something that when they get to Eight Oaks that they can do during the process there? What are some of the things they do at the recovery center while they're in the process? Give us something what would be a normal,
Sure.
You said, is it normally 30 days or?
There's 30 to 90 days, but the schedule remains pretty much the
Is
same.
it 90 days an average stay at a rehab center?
Actually, 20, you know what's funny is, like, remember the movie 28 Days? And I'm going to ask Charlotte a question.
Oh,
Charlotte,
okay.
do you have any idea why 28 days is a standard treatment episode in drug rehab? Like, insurance companies pay for 28 days.
Not 30.
The movie, do you remember the movie 28 Days? But do you know how 28 Days became the standard treatment episode in drug treatment? It has no sound clinical basis. What it is, so the Betty Ford Center, which was the forefather kind of the modern rehabs. I mean, and I've run treatment centers in the state of California.
Is it because it was in February and there was 28 days in February?
No.
Hey, come on,
It's because in the military, like, so Betty Ford herself, when she went to rehab, she went to the Naval Observatory. Okay. And then they started the Betty Ford Center in Palm Springs and modeled it after the treatment she went to. So what it is in the military, if you're away from your assignment for 30 days, you can get reassigned.
Oh.
So if you're in Honolulu working at a military base and you break your leg and you're in the hospital for 6 weeks, when you leave, they can send you to Anchorage, Alaska.
Oh, okay.
So
you only want to be there 28 days.
So nobody wanted to be away from the station for 30 days.
Okay.
So a day to get there, a day to get back, and literally there is no clinical basis for 28-day treatment. But actually, the longer the treatment episode, the more successful it is. But here's the thing. If you're Blue Cross and you're paying the bill, do you want to pay for 28 days or do you want to pay for 90 days?
You want to pay for 28 days.
28 days has become the standard because it's economically efficient for the insurance companies. They can use the excuse because, well, it's just always been 28 days. But it actually has no clinical basis in success. It has everything to do with reassignment in the military based on the first programs we had.
Okay. Well,
you were talking about sessions, what we do there. Coming into the sessions, that would be something like we have a Stepping into Freedom, which is like a faith-based 12-step program, and we base it all on Scripture and on the Bible. Then we have recovery, where we go over coping skills, triggers, help them to deal with when they feel that trigger coming on, the warning signs to that, and what do they do? Phone numbers they can call, walk away. We have anger management type things. We have health and wellness. We have what we call authentic manhood, where we teach them what a real man is supposed to be, taking on those responsibilities as a man. And we have a well-rounded clinical faith-based kind of program, and then we get into pastoral spiritual support kind of things that we really are able to pick out, like things like trust or boundaries, and give the biblical perspective to that, and then give the clinical side to it also. So we try to give a well-rounded curriculum that helps them. Today was kind of a cool first time I did this, and I had them peel an orange. And to take an orange, and I said, just peel it. They peel it, they take the hull off, and then they take the wedges, and then all the wedges, and separate the wedges, and they put it there. And then I had some office supplies, and they had push pins in there, tape, scissors, that kind of thing. And then I said, now take everything that's there, and then you have that as your tools. Now put that orange back together again.
Can't do it.
Oh, I've got some pictures of it. It was hilarious to see them take that tape and the push pins. And I said, would you like to eat that? Of course, no. And the idea of there is that all of those pieces of that hull and those wedges are bad decisions that they've made over the years. And they've made so many bad decisions that they would look back and all of a sudden they realize, my life's a mess. And then they try to put it back together. But when they try to put it back together, they don't know how. And so they got the push pins, and every one of those pieces represents something a decision that they made wrong. And so when it's all said and done, then I take another orange and I give it to them. And I said, you're trying to do this on your own. And in 1 Corinthians, it says that, we are a new creation, that when God gets us, he creates us new, gets rid of that old person, and he gives us somebody new. And so that was one of the things that we did today. And it gets them to think about what the bad decisions they made, and then they start naming the bad decisions that they've made. And I says, you know what? You don't have to worry about that no more. God's creating something new in your life, and this is what it is. Now, would you like to eat this one? So, and of course, they eat more than one orange, after that. So that's the kind of stuff that we do. Try to use object lessons and try to use the scriptures, try to use the plan. We try to throw that all together, and in the end, thank God that we're finding our niche. We're finding out what works for us there.
One other thing is we have, if you go to a secular program, so much of the 12 steps, anyone that's read the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous, understands it is Christian.
That's right.
But if somebody like Mike worked at a secular program, he'd probably get called to the office for bringing the stuff back to Scripture. We have the freedom to do that. Like, that is what we're all about. So, and we talked about this last week. It's a lot of the folks come in. Some of the folks are new to church. A lot of the folks have some church background. So we're bringing it back to a language they understand, and it's gonna sink in differently than just talking about, like, well, Freud said this or that, because this stuff, psychology is a new science per se in the academic world, but the Bible's all about that. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, as society has moved away from the spiritual, they started calling it psychology, and they had to repackage everything.
Right.
Well, our staff, we bring it back to where it came from in a lot of ways. So
I got a minor disagreement with that. It is secular, but it's also a lot of the health profession is mixed with new age ideas and philosophies. So it actually, a lot of that is spiritual, but it's not the kind of spiritual that we're trying to give to the guys.
no, he's correct. And that's the other thing that makes us different than a lot of secular programs. I would say, and I don't know what happens, and I'm not trying to make political commentary here, not that I'm above that, but I don't know what happens when somebody gets their master's degree in psychology, but I've had hundreds of folks work for me, and probably 70 to 80% of them, I would say solidly, have some degree of the Buddhism and the spirituality. And that's the thing, if that's what you're looking for, that's who's working at the secular programs. Like they talk about the spirituality. When we talk about spirituality, we're talking about Christ. We're talking about the Bible. And the thing is, I think a lot of that's got diluted, and it's do you want the real thing or do you want the diluted thing? And so that's the thing. If what somebody's looking for is a Christ-centered program, we're it. If you're looking for all that stuff mixed together, there's a lot more of that out there, and but that's a very different direction, I think.
And that's what makes us, I think, special, because we've got a special niche compared to all of that they're seeing out there. That we can give them both the clinical and the faith-based. And what we've done is we weed through all of the stuff that's got all of that, the New Age or some of the more anti-Christian kind of philosophies in it. We can weed all that out, look at the research, and take that what's good and bring it to the table, and mix that when they're aware of who they are. A lot of guys come in there and they're like, I don't want all this clinical stuff, and but then I show them that it helps them to become more aware of who they are, and they're when you say what a trigger is, it could be something as simple as a cooler. A cooler is a trigger because why? Because that's where they kept all their beer. So every time they see a cooler, it triggers into their head. So that kind of stuff we bring to them, and they said that is good stuff. Or we get the other side. We don't want all that Bible stuff. Well, maybe by the time you're done with here, you'll get something out of it.
Right.
And 9 times out of 10, it's exactly what happens. You take a guy who's never opened the Bible, and we wait. If I have a scripture, we wait till everybody's there. And then we read. And sometimes it takes 5 minutes to find the scripture, but that's okay. That's what it's about. We're all together. We're a team. And I've told them many times that we are a team here. There might be one day where I lose my faith, and I'm going to need you to come and kick me in the butt and to get me back on straight, because I don't know no more than you do, and you don't know more than I do. We're just in this together, trying to help each other to make a difference in this world, to change the world for Christ. And so far, it seems to be working.
Well, and I will tell you, like I said, we got to be careful with HIPAA here, so we can't use any names or anything, Mike.
Did I?
No.
Oh.
I'm just reminding you.
Okay.
I'm just reminding
You scared me
I
there
want to
for a minute.
remind you before I start saying this. But this, on Saturday, Sunday, I went to United's picnic at Davy Crockett Park, and David Morgan actually baptized 22 people in the creek at Davy Crockett Park, and there were several. We don't want to mention any names or anything, but there were several current and former clients of 8 Oaks that made the decision to get baptized, which is awesome. I mean,
Great.
and that's the thing. I mean, that's a step that those folks, will change the trajectory of their life, and that's what this is about. I mean, that's what this is about.
That's right.
And out of those 22, I know I recognize 1 or 2 of them. I don't know the clients as well as you do, but there was definitely several of the clients, former and current clients from 8 Oaks that decided to get baptized, which I think is awesome.
That's great.
Yeah, that is awesome.
So, tell us, we got just a couple more minutes. If you are interested in coming to 8 Oaks, what's the process here? Just check yourself in.
Well, the thing is, what you would do is you would call us, and we have, this is horrible.
What you have, there's room for 80?
80?
I don't
I
know.
wish.
12.
12.
12. But we do got, hey, all we need is
80 acres. You had 80 acres.
80 acres, that's it.
all we need is room for one if you give us a call today. And our phone number is 931-560-4272. The website is 8oaksrecovery.org. So it's 8oaksrecovery.org. And if anybody needs some help, or honestly wants to give us a call and talk to us about what's going on. I mean, and that's the thing. Maybe you don't know, and maybe they don't need it. I mean, maybe you got a loved one that's having some problems, and I mean, maybe you got an adolescent. Maybe you got a female that needs help. If you call us, we're gonna try to help you get in the right direction. You know what I mean? Like, our call center isn't just here for like, okay, you gotta have this insurance, you gotta be a man, you gotta want a Christian rehab. Like, hey, if you got someone in your family that's struggling with addiction, give us a call. And, we don't treat adolescents, but if you call us, we will help you find the help you need. It might be residential, might be outpatient. Like I said, females, men, anybody, we will try to help. And we definitely got a lot of resources, and I know a lot of folks struggle with that. So if you need some help with resources, give us a call.
Because there's a lot of hurting people out there who just need, I think, just information, and like you said, just don't really know who to call. And a lot of people struggling with a lot of problems, and I think you guys have a lot of great information. And like you said, just helping people and is the name of the game.
That's what we're here to do. I mean, it is a struggle, and like I said, I'm in recovery. My mother is a recovering heroin addict. I've seen addiction from every side. Like I said, there's addiction, and I honestly believe this. And folks out there that are listening, I do believe absolutely that addiction is hereditary. So if you're touched by it a little bit, you're probably touched by it a lot. You know what I mean? If you come from a family with addiction, it is definitely hereditary, that you have a propensity to it. It doesn't mean that you have to be an addict if your parents were an addict, or your kids have to be addicts because you were an addict. But you definitely have a genetic predisposition. And I will tell you, in the men's family, it runs deep. But but the thing is, there is hope, and there is also generational change. Like, and if you're in that position and you find recovery, you can help. You can't help anybody in your family until you solve your own problems. So there can be generational change, and addiction can also stop. I don't want it to be bleak, like, oh, there's addiction in your family, you're stuck. But but like I said, if you're touched a little, you're probably touched a lot. The chance of there being one random addict in your family, maybe someone had some trauma or something, and that happens. But it definitely. But there is help. There can be generational change, but the only person you have control over is you. So,
I've got a poem here, if we have time.
You sure do.
This is a poem that one of our guys wrote. It's called One Day. One day, to most people, one day doesn't mean much. One day is so easily taken for granted. No one appreciates one day as much as the addict. It starts as a hope or a dream. Maybe one day I can be sober. Maybe one day I can put all of this behind me. But how do I get started? It starts with one day. It just takes one day to have the courage to no longer let drugs control your life. It just takes one day to reach out to God for help. And once you've taken that one day step, every day after that is just as important. One day at a time, until the addiction isn't a life-consuming thought anymore. That's when one day is more important than ever. Never take for granted the one day when you decided to change your life. Give thanks to the Lord every day you wake up clean and sober. Once the importance of one day is gone, it's just a matter of time before that one day turns to day one all over again. And that's from one of our guys.
And that's wonderful. And Jared, like you said a while ago, hope.
That's right.
Hope is the word that we should leave everyone with.
Absolutely.
Because as long as there's hope, we can see another day and live for another day.
There you go.
Well, gentlemen, it's been an honor, and appreciate you coming by. And Mike, thanks for joining us.
Appreciate it.
And we will see you again next time.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.